I'm Hannah, and this is the story of my journey living with my autistic brother. Let me be clear, I love my brother dearly, but it can be quite challenging at times. From the moment my brother Samuel was born, I could tell he was different from other babies. For instance, Samuel didn't attempt to speak at all. I would spend hours trying to teach him to say my name, but he never uttered a sound. He didn't even start walking until he was 18 months old. Samuel's inability to communicate verbally often left him feeling frustrated when people couldn't grasp what he wanted. I remember a particular incident when we took him to the store. Mom placed him in the shopping cart and he began screaming uncontrollably. He even resorted to hitting her and tossing items out of the cart. The situation left Mom mortified. In her attempt to manage Samuel, a security guard approached her, believing she was mistreating her child. She had to convince the guard that she was simply trying to assist Samuel. However, this experience led to me being tasked with staying home with Samuel whenever Mom went shopping. Samuel was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3. It's a lifelong condition that impacts the way the brain functions. He has little interest in interacting with other people and becomes distressed when things don't go as planned. At the tender age of 8, I held the naive hope that there might be a pill or some magical solution to make Samuel better. But instead, he embarked on a journey of intensive therapy. There's no cure for autism, only support to make life a bit more manageable. When Samuel reached school age, the doctor suggested he attend a school for autistic children, but my parents firmly declined. Mom believed that he would never learn to be normal unless he was around typically developing kids. Truth be told, Mom was in denial. My brother would never fit the mold of what society considered normal. Being Samuel's sister in school was tough. Everyone labeled him as strange because he couldn't communicate verbally. And whenever he got excited or upset, he'd flap his arms like an unconventional bird. One day, I was in the schoolyard when I heard a group of kids chanting, "Eat it, eat it." I rushed over to find my brother in the midst of the group. One of the boys was trying to force him to eat something, and my brother was flapping his arms, rocking back and forth, and crying. His distress made me furious. I sprinted over, pushing the boy away, and yelled, "Leave my brother alone, you idiot." The boy retaliated by shoving me back, so I resorted to kicking and hitting him. No one would mistreat my brother like that. A teacher eventually intervened to break up the fight, and the boy had a bloody nose and a black eye. It wasn't the first time I had to defend my brother. However, the problem was that because I didn't appear injured, I ended up being the one in trouble. It didn't matter that I explained he had been bullying my brother. The principal stated that violence was no excuse, and I received a 3-week suspension. I loved my brother, but there were moments when he made my life incredibly challenging. It became even more complicated as I grew older and started dating. No one at school wanted to date the girl who was always with her severely autistic brother. People around me sometimes made hurtful comments, like the absurd idea of catching autistic lice from me. However, my focus shifted when I met Charles. He worked part-time at our local grocery store, and I found myself quite taken with him. We went on several dates, and our connection deepened. Yet, Charles was persistent about coming over to my house, a request I kept turning down. It wasn't because I was ashamed of Samuel, but rather my fear of scaring Charles away if he learned about my autistic brother. My parents decided to go on a month-long vacation, leaving me in charge of taking care of Samuel. They made it clear that if I didn't fulfill this responsibility, they would confiscate my phone and laptop. Knowing they would follow through, I had little room to complain. When Charles got wind of my parents' travel plans, he insisted on coming over. After initially declining, Charles threatened to break up with me, so I reluctantly agreed. Before Charles' arrival, I instructed Samuel to stay in his room and promised him 10 packs of Oreos. Samuel had a profound love for Oreos, and my plan was to keep him occupied with cookies, hoping he'd leave Charles and me alone. As Charles arrived, Samuel was happily munching on cookies and watching Frozen for what felt like the millionth time. I brought Charles into my room, and he immediately started kissing me. He proceeded to remove my shirt and bra, leaving me feeling incredibly uncomfortable, sitting there half undressed. Charles tried to reassure me, saying I looked beautiful, but his words only deepened my unease. After some time passed, I mustered the courage to search for Samuel. Hours went by as I looked for him, until finally, I discovered him in the shower. "Samuel," I exclaimed, startled. "What are you doing? You scared me." He waved a bunch of empty Oreo cookie wrappers at me, having devoured them all. Samuel pointed at both me and Charles and burst into laughter. Charles, baffled by Samuel's behavior, asked, "What's wrong with him? Is he okay?" Anger surged within me as I retorted, "Don't call my brother that." I forcefully pushed Charles away. "Get out of my house." I never saw Charles again, and truthfully, I was relieved. However, a few weeks later, I began experiencing bouts of nausea. At first, I suspected it might be a stomach bug, but I decided to take a pregnancy test, just to be sure. To my shock, the test came back positive. The thought of becoming a mother terrified me, especially since I was still so young and had broken up with Charles, leaving me to contemplate single parenthood. My fears extended beyond just my age and relationship status. What if my baby had a condition like Samuel's? Autism is genetic, so there was a chance that my child could be autistic too. Caring for my brother was already challenging, and I couldn't imagine raising an autistic child. Ultimately, I decided to have an abortion, a decision I kept hidden from everyone. I felt that I was not yet ready to be a parent and wanted to live my life before taking on that responsibility. After that abortion, a heavy sense of failure and depression settled upon me. Although my parents noticed my depression, they remained unaware of the true reason behind it. One day, they surprised me by asking me to put Samuel in the car. As we drove away from our house, my mom revealed that we were heading to a local animal shelter to choose a dog. She told me she understood how challenging it was for me to care for Samuel all the time, and this was her way of expressing gratitude. I was genuinely touched that they were finally doing something kind for me. As we drove, I couldn't help but envision what my future dog would look like. I longed for a small companion that could sleep at the foot of my bed, a loyal friend. In my mind, I would teach my new furry companion tricks and share my life with them. However, fate took a cruel turn. Suddenly, a truck crashed into the side of our car, causing us to lose control and collide with a tree. The impact caused me to black out, and when I regained consciousness, I found myself in a hospital bed. A nurse stood beside me, checking my pulse, and when she noticed I was awake, she offered a sad smile. Anxious and disoriented, I asked about my parents, but her sullen shake of the head shattered my hopes. My parents had perished in the accident, leaving my life even more challenging than before. I had no choice but to quit school. The responsibility of caring for Samuel was too overwhelming. My dreams of attending college and possibly becoming a therapist for autistic children were abruptly shelved. My focus had to shift entirely to Samuel. As for my love life, it seemed like an unattainable dream. I couldn't imagine anyone who would willingly take on the lifelong responsibility of caring for Samuel, and the thought of dating felt distant and improbable. Then I met Owen. He was an electrician working on repairs at my house, and we struck up a conversation. Remarkably, he didn't seem fazed when Samuel engaged in his unique behaviors. Owen shared that he had an aunt with a learning disability, so he was accustomed to being around people who were different. We began dating, and I genuinely liked him. Owen was considerate, helping me arrange for a babysitter for Samuel so we could have some time together. He never pressured me into anything I wasn't ready for. However, as our relationship deepened, I couldn't help but wish for a life without the constant responsibility of Samuel. Even though Owen was incredibly understanding and kind to my brother, I knew our relationship could flourish if Samuel didn't live with me. It was then that I began considering the idea of placing Samuel in a home designed for autistic individuals. I consulted with lawyers who confirmed that as long as I ensured Samuel's needs were met, I could still manage my parents' finances. I found a wonderful place for Samuel, complete with a spacious garden for him to enjoy. When I brought him there, he seemed unfazed when I bid him farewell, assuring me that he'd be fine. With a light heart, I couldn't wait to share the news with Owen. Finally, we could experience the joys of a more typical relationship. However, when I told Owen that Samuel was now in a care facility, his reaction was unexpectedly intense. "How could you do this?" he exclaimed, his voice filled with anger. "He's your brother, your family. He should be here with you." In the end, Owen ended our relationship. Owen's words weighed heavily on my conscience, as Samuel was indeed my last remaining family member. Still, I couldn't ignore the newfound freedom from constant worry and the chance to complete my high school education. A week passed without Samuel, and truthfully, it felt incredibly strange. Over the years, the guilt I carried never truly subsided. Eventually, I made the decision to visit Samuel on his 19th birthday and proposed that he come back to live with me. To my astonishment, I discovered that Samuel was no longer at the care facility. I panicked when they informed me that Samuel had married and moved into an apartment with his wife. They didn't disclose whether she was also autistic. It felt like a disaster, and I rushed to the address they provided, barging in without knocking. What I witnessed was profoundly moving. Samuel sat on the sofa with his wife, radiating love. She tenderly fed him fruit, and I saw the happiness in my brother's eyes. In that moment, I realized how foolish I had been to assume that my brother could never have a fulfilling life or find love. He had even married before me. From that day forward, I stopped worrying about the possibility of having a child who might be autistic. I learned to trust that the universe has a way of balancing things and guiding people like my brother toward their own happiness. Leo and I first crossed paths at the age of 13 and immediately became the closest of friends. By the time we turned 15, we made the decision to transition from friendship to dating. I was part of the school hockey team, and that's where I first met Isaac. Although he was a year younger than me, his towering stature and captivating eyes caught my attention. Blushing uncontrollably, I couldn't help but feel drawn to him when he signed up for the team. In the ensuing weeks, Isaac and I grew closer, our conversations deepening, and we even began holding hands. He confessed his love for me and urged me to break up with Leo to be with him, asking me to become his girlfriend. I found myself torn, unsure of how to proceed. The summer break was looming, and I told Isaac that I intended to end things with Leo. However, despite my intentions, I couldn't bring myself to go through with it. The decision weighed on me, and I kept postponing the inevitable. During the holiday, I saw Leo a few times, but it felt uncomfortable and wrong, shrouded in secrecy. Fearing that he might suspect something was amiss, I reassured Leo of my love for him and arranged a dinner date. At the restaurant with Leo, I excused myself to visit the bathroom. When I returned, I found him holding my phone. Leo had stumbled upon a message from Isaac that arrived while I was away, and my heart sank. I burst into tears, attempting to deny the truth, apologizing profusely, and confessing it had been a terrible mistake. In response, Leo left the restaurant, leaving me in a state of despair. When I returned to school in the fall, word had already spread, and everyone knew what had transpired. Isaac no longer wished to speak to me, feeling betrayed by my dishonesty, and Leo distanced himself as well. Now it has been 2 months since the incident, and people have largely moved on from the drama. Life has returned to its usual routine, but with one significant absence. Leo is no longer a part of it.